Let me give you two answers.
Excellent.
Let me give you the classic answer, which is that civic education deals with the structures and functions of government, and citizenship education deals with the ways citizens engage and act in the communities of which they are a part. Now, that's a definition. What's not revealed there is that my own background in terms of both engaging with, learning about civic education was in the United States at Stanford University in the late 1970s. And I had a supervisor and mentor, Professor Richard Gross, who only ever talked about civic education. So every seminar was about civic education. And I actually kept saying to him, but Professor Gross, because I never called him by his first name. He was a professor, right? Professor Gross. In Australia, there's no such thing as civic education. So why am I doing these courses? And he would say, you're not in Australia now, you're in the United States, so you have to do these courses. When I went back to Australia, once I'd finished my degree, what started to happen was a resurrection, I use that term cautiously, of civic education by Paul Keating's government in the 1990s. And so suddenly I realized that everything I'd done at Stanford was actually quite relevant. And I was wedded then, perhaps forcefully at first, to the idea of civic education. I personally see it as much broader because I think it focuses on the community, on the civicus, if you like. But I realize that people will ask exactly the question, why civic and not citizenship education? So my book series is actually called Civic and Citizenship Education.
Exactly. So let's embrace both. That's probably the best. Always the holistic way.
my personal experience simply makes me talk about civic education. And then we can have this conversation, of course.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I want to ask you a question related to your forthcoming projects. I know that you're very active, you're a very dynamic public intellectual, and we worked together for some of your series too in the past with great pleasure. Forthcoming projects, what is on the table at the moment that you are prepared to share with our audience, or any team idea that you particularly interested in and you like to develop moving forward?
Well, let me talk about two things, and the first may seem a little strange. We have in Hong Kong a requirement that all students in universities, and indeed all students in schools, must study national security education. This is not a well-known term. It is used elsewhere and means different things. What national security education is largely civic education in the traditional sense of the term. It is about the structure and functions of the Hong Kong government, of the Chinese government, of the way those two things are related. But there's a hesitancy to talk about it. So I was very fortunate to be asked by a colleague to join in a project that would ask students in universities what their views were of national security education. And my purpose in joining that was to try to normalize the use of the term, to highlight it as one aspect of the way in which citizens are educated, that it's not abnormal. In fact, it's probably maybe a little bit too normal. And so we were able to talk with students in 11 universities in Hong Kong and get their feedback and try to understand where they were coming from. So that's one area, and we're just writing some papers on that now and trying to both to understand the results, where students were quite frank about what they experienced and what they wanted to experience. So that's
For example,